Get off my property before I call the police. That's what this unhinged woman, Margaret White, shrieked at me, standing there all wild-eyed and trembling like she'd just caught an intruder in her house, when all I'd done was drive up the same rutted trail my family has used since Reagan was in office. I'm telling you, I hadn't even gotten the engine off when I realized something was very, very wrong. Because suddenly there's concrete barriers blocking the trail, fresh, slick, and ugly, set deep with rebar and stamped with Sunset Ridge HOA, and Margaret's name like she's the damn queen of the county. This was the path my grandfather first cleared in 1987, the one my wife Sarah and I used to walk down every weekend with a dozen laughing neighbor kids, rods and tackle boxes swinging, sharing stories under the sun. But Sarah's gone now. Cancer took her 2 years ago, and for 2 years I couldn't bring myself to come back. Not until that day. Not until the ache felt bearable. But I guess fate had a different kind of welcome home in mind. Because instead of birds and lake breeze, all I could smell was wet cement, and the silence was so heavy I swear it felt like the woods themselves were watching. That's when I spotted her, Margaret White, waving legal papers like a matador, shouting about trespassing and her rightful inheritance. You ever get that feeling? You've walked into someone else's nightmare, and they're about to cast you as the villain? Yeah, that happened. So there I was, clutching Sarah's old fishing knife, staring at these barriers like, maybe if I just blinked hard enough, they'd disappear. But no. Every sign, every fresh survey map tacked to a fence post, screamed that Margaret was dead serious. Except, here's what made my skin crawl. Underneath her shiny new sign, someone had hung an old, weathered survey, the ink barely legible, but it clearly showed my family's name and the easement from 1987. It didn't add up. Why reference an old grantor if her claim was so solid? Why make this move right when I finally came back, vulnerable as I've ever been? I'll tell you one thing. I might be a retired accountant, but I know when someone's trying to pull a fast one. And Margaret's operation? It had all the hallmarks, legal documents in order, permits filed, construction done by pros, not some angry neighbor with a Home Depot card. This was calculated. Psychological warfare disguised as bureaucracy. I did what anyone with an ounce of sense would do. I started taking photos. GPS, timestamps, everything. And sent them straight to Linda Walker, the only neighbor I trust completely. Let me back up a sec. Linda is the type who remembers when you switched banks and if your dog gets a haircut. She knows things. And as I'm standing there, phone at 47%, I realized just how deep this rabbit hole was about to go. It didn't take long for word to spread. Mrs. Peterson yelled from across the lake. We heard about Sarah. So sorry about your troubles with the new HOA president. Wait, what HOA? I'd never heard a word about any of this. Our lake was always the kind of place where you bring over soup and leave each other alone. And yet, here I was, locked out by a woman who seemed to have the legal system on speed dial and an appetite for control. I drove around that whole afternoon, noticing small clusters of neighbors, all whispering about property disputes, enforcement, Margaret White's name popping up like some bad penny. I'd walked into a storm, and somehow, I was the only one who didn't get the memo. That night, with legal threats piling up in my inbox, I dug deep. Heritage Property Recovery Services? Specialized firm. Only called in for inheritance, disputes, and complicated transfers. Margaret wasn't freelancing here. She'd brought in pros. My stomach sank. This was no cranky neighbor spat. This was full-on legal warfare. But then, a crack. Because if she really was the rightful heir, why did she need my permission? Why go to these lengths? The next morning, I was done playing defense. I marched right up to her massive house, Lakeview. Survey gear on the porch, a husband who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, and rang the bell. Margaret met me at the door in a navy suit, folder under her arm, the whole setup like a job interview. Not a neighborly chat. Mr. Miller, she said, all smiles. Come in. Let's be civilized. Her living room looked like an evidence locker. Maps, timelines, photos spread out, every inch a war room. She spun a tale. My grandfather convinced her dying mother to sell 200 acres for $15,000 in 1987. And now, after 4 decades, she wanted justice, claiming elder abuse, dementia, you name it. Medical records, testimony, the whole 9 yards. She was good, real good. But something about her story felt rehearsed, just off by a hair. And her husband, Tom, shuffling around outside, staring at his shoes, clearly terrified. Well, I couldn't shake the sense that he was caught in something he couldn't control. Then came the twist that flipped my whole understanding. Linda, true to form, dug deeper and uncovered Margaret's Tuesday routine at Sunset Manor. And get this, Clara Wilson, the supposed dead mother, was alive. There's Linda's recording, clear as day. Who is this woman? She says she's my daughter, but I don't know her. It was like ice water down my spine. All those notarized documents, death certificates, power of attorney, forgeries, lies, smoke and mirrors. Margaret had been isolating Clara, faking legal claims, even manipulating nursing home staff to cut off real family. And it got darker, so much darker. Tom, Margaret's husband, finally cracked after Linda discovered a chemical injection system hidden in my well, rigged to poison the water supply. He'd been forced to install it, terrified Margaret would ruin him if he refused. Turns out, Margaret wasn't just stealing property. She was running an operation, targeting the elderly, using poison to break resistance, faking documents, and siphoning off assets across multiple states. Yeah, I ended up in the hospital, nearly dead from heavy metal poisoning. But while I was out, Linda, that absolute bulldog, kept fighting, coordinating with a local attorney, who flagged the pattern for federal investigators. And suddenly, what started as a property fight was the tip of a national iceberg, an elder abuse and fraud network spanning 12 states. Millions stolen, hundreds of lives ruined. We turned the tables with the kind of drama you usually only see on TV. A live broadcast, Margaret thinking she was about to defend her reputation, only to watch, in real time, as Susan Wilson, the real daughter, walked onto the set and called her out, point by point, with details no imposter could fake. Margaret melted down on camera, screaming, kicking at equipment, until the sheriff cuffed her right there in front of half the county and FBI agents swept in to seize her assets. Tom confessed to everything on live television. Families of other victims came forward, and suddenly the little community that Margaret tried to tear apart was united in a way I'd never seen. Even the teenagers were outside, laughing as she raged. In the mud, her fancy suit ruined, shouting about conspiracies nobody believed anymore. Margaret's house? The county turned it into a senior center, complete with wheelchair ramps and a fishing dock. In Sarah's memory, my trail was restored, barriers torn down, access guaranteed forever, and a plaque honoring all those who fought to save this place from predators. And as for the investigation, it exploded, thousands of victims, millions in fraud, and a prison sentence that'll keep Margaret from ever running another scam. So yeah, the fight for justice never really ends. Just when you think it's over, another letter lands on the table. A Florida family asking about a woman named Margaret, a Tuesday visitor with paperwork. The battle moves on. But if you've made it this far, you're part of this now. Drop your thoughts below. What would you have done? Who gets to decide what's right and wrong when the law itself is used as a weapon? Tell me, when justice gets messy, whose side are you on? And if you've got a story about neighbors, inheritance, or fighting back against folks who think they can buy their way through life, share it. You might just help someone spot the next Margaret White before it's too late.